Hello YouTube, what's up? Happy Thanksgiving from sunny California, the United States of America. Let's see, so today's stream, I don't have like a big topic prepared, except for just generally to chat about America, American holidays, and all the things in between. Reason for this topic is, well, it's Thanksgiving in the United States, which is a American holiday. So I pulled up Wikipedia here. We could look into what Thanksgiving is about and the history of it. Looks like Mr. Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War were quite important in bringing Thanksgiving to official status. And then related to this are the general topics of American work culture, which one might argue is American culture generally. We have a very, very corporate branded society here in the United States. So I'm going to be talking about these topics, and feel free to drop your messages in the chat. And I will be happy to talk about what you all are interested in too, as well. So let's see. Reaper, looks like he's got some food coming, waiting on steamed pork dumpling, scallion pancakes, stir-fried rice cakes, Peking duck to be delivered. Yes, ordering Chinese food on an American holiday where many like white American businesses are closed is a American tradition. Reaper asks, am I doing Thanksgiving right, or am I anti-establishment? No, I think you are being you are being a very efficient establishment American, benefiting from the neoliberal policies of America, extending its reach and bringing in people that have all sorts of culinary knowledge from all around the world into this country, especially to large cities and urban areas, and then using the most efficient of technologies to have those items delivered to your doorstep. Increíble. Very incredible. All right. So just a couple words about the preview image I found here. So on another stream, I was searching this term, algocracy, which comes from algorithms, the rule of a society by algorithms. So we could already see in certain domains how this essentially is the case. Like, we could say in some cities the taxi business, the ride cab business, if you're using Uber or something, essentially the business is run by an algorithm, because rather than using a Yellow Pages phone book or something to look things up, you're going ahead and you are calling the cab. Oh, we're joined by another friend, Frenzy Friends. Wave to friends, Frenzy. Frenzies are European here. So maybe Frenzy will have some insight to offer regarding European ways and how Americans are weird. Alright, so I'll finish the blurb I was making about Abraham Lincoln here. Yeah, so I found this page looking at this term algocracy to talk about rule by algorithms. Maybe this is a kind of special feature that has popped up a lot in America First, as we have the big tech firms here like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and so on, America, and California in particular, as well as some other states, I think like the West Coast, Washington, and then going a little bit more inland to Colorado and stuff. You have a lot of these big experiments, whether through government military stuff or through at least the appearance of private industry. We have all sorts of fun stuff going on. Anyways, I found that this image was very interesting. First off, of course, you have this Abraham Lincoln statue, and we could talk more about like Lincoln, the cult of Lincoln, something like that. Abraham Lincoln has an interesting place in American culture. But also just looking at this thing here. So what is Lincoln doing here as a algocracy person? He's like a statue. So it's depicted him not as a living person, but as like a kind of idol, I guess. And what he's looking at is all this data chart here. So you have the whole globe here, the whole world. Actually, I won't say globe. I'll be Earth-shaped neutral. He has a representation of all the continents being spread out right here on this map, and then he has these various charts. So he's like analyzing data, trying to optimize stuff. And let's actually take a look at where that Lincoln statue, where this image comes from, is. Lincoln statue. Okay, so the Lincoln Monument. We'll go to TripAdvisor. Let's have a web exploration experience. Will TripAdvisor have lots of ads and me not being able to find the image I was looking for? High five from a Segway. My dude, I don't want to see you on a Segway and your friends with colorful shirts. I was looking for the Lincoln Monument. So maybe if I search Lincoln Monument. Frenzy says Europeans are weird too. Here in Belgium, they don't seem to have heard of fly screens by and large. By fly screens, you just mean screens on Windows? In where I'm from in California, we'll just talk about those as screens generally. Or like if you have a yard or a patio, oftentimes you'll have a sliding screen and then a glass door that goes in front. And yeah, sometimes if you want to let some air circulation come in your house, then you'll open the screen or open the door but leave the screen closed. Occasionally people will close the door and leave the screen open, but then their kids or pet dog or something might run into the window, smash their head against it. So then people will put little colored stickers or something on the window. All right, let's look at this imposing monument of Abraham Lincoln. So, yeah, actually, I don't know very much about this, but clearly it's channeling these classical vibes, and then it's like a big stone monolith. How it's white. I heard that there's a lot of these Greek old buildings, Roman buildings too, they were actually quite colorful. Like they would paint these buildings. So when you see them presented white, kind of like clean stone, then of course that's the image a lot of us will remember about these classical buildings, having seen them in books and stuff. But maybe when those things were actually being used, they didn't look like that. But now people might intentionally make that look because people will associate it with classical civilization. But it will look very much like a tomb. So it looks quite cold and dead. You could have servers in here. Like if we let's look at a server. We'll open another tab and let's look at a server room for some comparison. Yeah, Frenzy says, yeah, by fly screens, he meant screens to keep out insects when you open the window. Yeah, well, maybe, I don't know. I think that they're useful. I don't have mosquitoes and stuff bothering me, flies, so I'm assuming that they're working. Okay, so what I'm saying about the Lincoln Memorial looking kind of cold and sterile. So here's like a server room with the white color. Here's some more with the white floor, white color. So looking quite cold and sterile. And you see, the linear perspective, the lines. I think the hipsters are calling these things like liminal spaces or something now. I heard this term. Let's see what comes up when I search this. Hope it's not anything bad. Oh, Frenzy. Okay, our cultured Belgian says Doric columns. So here, these must be Doric as opposed to, I think, Corinthian or something. Okay, so here, liminal spaces. Yes, look, linear perspective, not really many people, kind of cold and dark. Okay, look, liminal spaces. We're getting our art education here. Now let's get our classical education. Let's look at some Doric columns. Let's learn us some architecture. Yes, Frenzy, you're correct. It looks like they're indeed Doric columns. Right. Reaper says, lol, comparison of Lincoln Memorial to data center mono aesthetics. I think, okay, in general, with a lot of these modern buildings, and I was actually literally just downtown in my own city, Sacramento, and I was looking at like another monolithic building. So I could even try to search it. It's like there's this big AT&T building. Maybe it'll come up. Yeah, this building. I was like, or that might not be the exact building, but something that was looking kind of like this. I was just looking at these down the street from me. Just these massive monolithic rectangles. So, okay, we need... Oh, there's also a creepy pyramid in my city, like a ziggurat. It's a government building for general services, whatever that means. So what was I looking at? Oh yeah, AT&T building. And I want to look in Sacramento, where I am. Yeah, so there's this building down the street from me. It's like these old retro computers, just a huge beige box. So in Europe, do you guys have, I would guess maybe at least in Germany, in some kind of industrial places, you would see sort of this stuff. But in California, at least, if you go to the downtowns, they're pretty common. Like if I search, for example, let's look at San Francisco buildings. Like, I don't know, the Salesforce building. I think the Salesforce building is pretty huge and monolithic. Yeah, Salesforce Tower. Look at that. Look at that image of just sales. Okay, Frenzy lists some other column names: Doric versus Ionic and Corinthian. Cool. Anyways, I'll get back on topic. So Lincoln here with this looking at data stuff here, and then you could even see the Doric column looking things with this chair. There's like a parallel with the form. And yeah, just I didn't realize how much column action there was on the side, because I've seen this statue and I've seen maybe the steps, but I didn't realize the scale of this. Is this the inside? Oh, that looks perfectly Egyptian. We'll get into this Egyptian stuff. Don't worry. I have some spicy links to bring up. Right. Reaper says that Manhattan also has a similar AT&T building. We could look at that really quick. that looks like the it's the Amogus sus face. Look at this building. It's super sus. Sorry, world. We're gonna do some internet culture. Image 1. Image 2. Image 1. Image 2. AT&T building. Doesn't look like it has very many windows. Okay, Reaper says the AT&T buildings look like they're there to prevent hacking of telecoms from wireless EM methods. And then Reaper mentions something about Game of Thrones. Did somebody say something about Egyptian? It might have gotten blocked. Silly YouTube. Are they trying to block the secret hieroglyph knowledge? I hadn't thought about that electromagnetic radiation aspect of it. I haven't ever thought about building a giant Faraday cage to defend myself. I have a microwave next to me. Yeah, here's a Faraday cage right here, but I don't have one myself to. I didn't line my walls with anything. Okay. So let's return a little bit and talk about America. So Lincoln, America corporations. One thing I think that's very interesting about America is that a lot of the American cultural things that we have, they are very fuzzily defined. And they're very like, it doesn't have to do with particular people in a very definite way. Like, I would say in general, Abraham Lincoln is pretty popular. And then the reason people would say Abraham Lincoln is popular generally, they would probably say, well, he fought against slavery and he held the country together. Something like that. But this is all very loose. So it's like, is America then, if he held us together, what's holding the United States together? Is it that at one point there was 50 states, so there should always be 50 states? I'm talking about now, not always. During Abraham Lincoln's time, I'm not sure how many states they had. And a lot of the country thought slavery wasn't bad, but now most of us, pretty much all of us, think slavery is bad. So therefore, we're united as a country. And then there's like, we have a holiday such as Christmas, and we have a silly story about a red suited fat laughing man, and parents tell kids this even if they don't believe that themselves. And then there's this holiday that just passed not too long ago called Halloween, where we dress up as our favorite superheroes or Harry Potter or something, and then we go to the rich people neighborhood and ask for candy. So a lot of aspects of American culture, I remember even growing up, I found them really, like, I would say kind of off-putting and goofy. Like, I'll just give some specific examples around the winter time, and then I'll try to bring this back to more Thanksgiving specific stuff. But like around winter time, they might have us sing a song like Frosty the Snowman or something. Now, I'm in California, and it's very low altitude. So there's no snow. Like, no one's making a snowman. You got to drive at least a couple hours if you want to have any sort of snow. So it'd be like, we'd be singing songs that have to do with weather and stuff that isn't relevant to us. Like, we would see movies and TV shows maybe that would have snow, but for this one kind of Christmas holiday, and then you would get a lot of students. For example, like a Jewish student would not celebrate Christmas in any capacity. They would say, "I don't do that," or do Hanukkah or something. And then there might just be people from a totally different culture who don't, like, they never had that tradition set up. And then, like, I would say my own family, a lot of my family came to the United States, and they call Asian Americans the model minorities, because oftentimes Asian Americans are very good at cooperating and playing the game, so to speak. So Asian Americans, for example, I think if you look at the statistics, they tend to have very high educational attainment, that sort of thing. So in addition to, like, studying and doing well on tests and stuff, I think you'll get a lot of Asian American people that readily have taken up cultural aspects of America. So, for example, singing these Christmas songs, like decorating the houses. Growing up, like, I know a bunch of people who would do stuff like buy Disneyland passes. Because right now I'm in Sacramento, but I'm from Southern California. A lot of people in Southern California, maybe they're 30 minutes to an hour away from Disneyland. They would drop a couple $100 or whatever it takes to get a Disneyland pass, and then they would just, like, frequently go to Disneyland. So all this is might be kind of strange to somebody that isn't from, I guess, Southern California, maybe America generally, because it's like, consciously, I mean, we all know Disneyland is like a simulation. I think Frenzy shared with me that we got the big brain word, the simulacrum. Did I smell that right? Simulacrum. We could go here, channeling the Foucault. Let's see, a simulacrum, simulacra, from Latin means likeness or semblance, a representation or imitation of a person or thing. So Disneyland is like this weird magic, futuristic fantasy place that tries to copy all these things. Anyways, this would become a place where a lot of people would frequently go. I mean, you could even look at how not so overtly fantasy things, but how like a lot of shopping malls, branding, a lot of this stuff in general, you might operate by similar principles. Oh, looks like our European frenzy might go and look at Frosty the Snowman, the lyrics for these bizarre American creations. Oh, so going off to this idea of shopping malls and stuff, and actually this was suggested on the topics here before, shopping malls and marketplaces. So one of the places in which a lot of this commercial culture would be spread would be through shopping centers, basically. So like in Southern California, there's a famous mall called South Coast Plaza Shopping Mall. And this is considered a very big, well-run, upscale mall. So as a kid, sometimes I would go around this place. But at malls, oftentimes you would see them playing a lot of these like Christmas songs like Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that sort of song. And they would have like giant trees, very elaborate decorations, all sorts of stuff. Halloween, oftentimes people would do a little bit, and then Thanksgiving, maybe some generic fall stuff. Not as striking a lot of the time, but they would have that stuff. Yeah, so here, like, they would set up these giant trees. So it's often these commercial centers, which would be the vectors by which a lot of American culture, I guess, if you want to call it culture. So a lot of American culture, you could say, is created via branding. It's kind of from corporations, and then it will spread, and people, they'll get together and they'll congregate in places like shopping malls. And you could see in American Christmas film flicks and stuff that many of the traditions of America have to do with, like, you know, shopping, whether it's buying toys for kids, chocolates and stuff as gifts, the whole story of Red Hat Santa Claus, all sorts of stuff here. So Thanksgiving, on the other hand, I would say, as far as holidays in the United States go, Thanksgiving is actually one of the more low-key holidays where you would tend to actually get families getting together, rather than it being a commercial holiday. Though I think we have to talk about Black Friday, okay? Because Black Friday is a like marketing only holiday. So if there's anything there I said that sounded wholesome and friendly about Thanksgiving being like a nice, pleasant, non-commercialized holiday, then there's the holiday of Black Friday, shopping holiday. So let's actually, I'll briefly go and we'll look over the Thanksgiving Wikipedia, and then we'll jump over to the Black Friday one. Let's look at a slightly politically incorrect cartoon first as an intermission, though. So, what did you bring for Thanksgiving? My specialty. And then it's a pot of red pills. And the first person says, no politics at the dinner table. Ha 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 ha. So, another American theme with Thanksgiving is don't talk about religion or politics at the dinner table. And this, I would say, this actually goes back to Abraham Lincoln and algocracy here. It's this whole idea of, like, nowadays you get a lot of talk about internet censorship type stuff, because there's like a lot of things, whether it's out of political correctness, so people afraid of getting in trouble at their workplace or whatever. There's a lot of fear and anxiety surrounded talking about a lot of topics. And oftentimes the way that people deal with something they don't like is they try to suppress it, to just block it, right? So with algocracy, right, people say stuff you don't like, they aren't allowed to express what they want. So that is to say that algocracy, even before lots of digital technology and stuff was everywhere, culturally as an American thing, at least for my entire life, I've heard phrases like "don't talk about religion and politics at the dinner table," Thanksgiving dinner table, which I would say is kind of ironic if you do accept that that the original Thanksgiving was a overtly religious holiday. So just going here to the Thanksgiving United States page, so it's one of the federal holidays. Relative to other countries, the United States does not have that many federal holidays. And here I'll just read this. It originated as a day of Thanksgiving and Harvest Festival, with the theme of the holiday revolving around giving thanks, and the centerpiece of Thanksgiving celebrations remaining a Thanksgiving dinner. And then it says what the dinner typically consisted of. And then another blurb here. New England and Virginia colonists originally celebrated days of fasting as well as days of Thanksgiving, thanking God for blessings such as harvests, ship landings, military victories at the end of a drought. So feasts and fasts for different events. The event that Americans commonly called the first Thanksgiving was celebrated by the Pilgrims. So who are the Pilgrims? Says the English settlers who came to North America on the Mayflower, a boat name that we all know, and established the Plymouth colony in what is today Plymouth, Massachusetts, named after the final departure port of Plymouth, Devon. Their leadership came from their religious congregations of, and then we won't go into details about who exactly the Pilgrims were, though that is another interesting topic to go into after the first harvest. Okay, and then famously, especially in contemporary times, is this little tidbit here that the feast was attended by many Native Americans as well. I'm not going to try to say and butcher the pronunciation of the name of their tribe. But America, along with the Abraham Lincoln, all that stuff, has come to represent a, like, different people coming together in a kind of common project at the dinner table in a common enterprise. So a time of peace, a time of coming together, as opposed to a like no politics and religion at the dinner table, basically. Oh, Frenzy's off to sleep. Good night, our European friend Frenzy. Good to see you here today. All right, now that Frenzy's gone, let's talk about Abraham Lincoln some more. So, looking at the origins of Thanksgiving, it seems that one of the big points in which this became a thing was here in the middle of the American Civil War. So let's actually get the exact dates of that, because I should know, but I don't. So April 12th, 1861 to May 9th, 1865. So mid-19th century Civil War. In the middle of that, President Abraham Lincoln, prompted by a series of editorials written by Sarah Joseph Hale. So who is she? American writer, activist, and influential editor. She was the author of the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb. What? and famously campaigned for the creation of the American holiday known as Thanksgiving. Okay, so Reaper, I know you like to eat meat. Um, Mary had a little lamb, a little ham, a little jam. Mary had a hot dog bun. That's why Mary weighs a ton. You see that? You see that rhyme I made there? Um, so I did not realize that connection. That the person that wrote this "Mary Had a Little Lamb" song nursery rhyme became was a promotion of the creation of Thanksgiving. And let's see, to be celebrated the final Thursday of November, 1863. So then there's a big long quote I'm not going to read about Thanksgiving. And this includes just giving thanks to God for all the providence that has been given, despite all the errors that people have done, that God has been merciful to the United States and the people here. So, yes, here. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the highest God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, has nevertheless remembered mercy. So, reading this, I thought this was, it seemed good to me, I'll put it that way. But just thinking of how you have all these different groups in America, whether it's white people, black people, Native Americans, all these different people. So how do you possibly have a holiday to bring people together when they've been fighting for hundreds of years, and right in the middle of the Civil War too? So the United States as we know it hasn't even been around in its current form. Rather, it's very different cultures, different people groups, and what is the Thanksgiving holiday? It's almost like a PR campaign. Well, I won't say it's a PR campaign. It's an effort to bring people together, to offer, like, let's sit down peacefully at a table together. That's what it sounds like to me. So, yeah, overall, I would say that just from what I understand, I like the Thanksgiving holiday. I think it's a good thing to remember that all of us, right, we're all people, no matter what differences people have together. Right, we could all sit down together. Unfortunately, in this day and age, you get all sorts of people with different dietary restrictions and all sorts of stuff. So it's an increasingly complex ordeal to actually get everybody to enjoy a meal together. So maybe even this fact alone, that it would be so hard to coordinate the logistics of a Thanksgiving dinner, it speaks to the state of the unity of, like, the United States. Yes. What is that quote? Ex pluribus unum. Is that it? Let's learn some Latin. Okay. There we go. A pluribus unum. Latin for out of many one. Translated as one out of many or one for many, is a traditional motto of the United States, appearing on the Great Seal, along with Annuit Cuiptis, Latin for he approves the undertaking, and Novus Ordo Seclorum, Latin for New Order of the Ages. More spooky America lore. Its inclusion on the seal was approved by an act of Congress in 1782, while its status as national motto was for many years unofficial. A pluribus unum was still considered the de facto motto of the United States from its early history. So this actually come later, like the 20th century. So it originates from the 13 colonies. Origin suggested in 1776. Okay, so A pluribus unum was known and around even at the time when the Civil War came to be and Thanksgiving came to be. Very interesting. Okay, Reaper has a comment. He says, "Are we to read between the lines as assume Mary had a little roast lamb?" Yes, that's why I thought that was funny, and I brought that up to you because I know that you enjoy eating many different animals. Cool. So I think, yeah, unless anybody has any specific questions, there's some American lore for the day, which is, I'll just reemphasize a couple points that a lot of the stuff in the United States, it's quite new. So if we look and we see the Civil War from the 1860s, this is it's a long time ago in terms of like one person's lifetime, two people's lifetimes. But compared to other civilizations in different parts of the world, of course, there are cities that are much, much, much older than this. So all things considered, it's pretty new. That's the first thing. And then second, so let's assume Thanksgiving kind of came from Abraham Lincoln starting at that point. Then even from that point, then the form of the United States still took a long time to take shape. So if the origins of the Thanksgiving celebration came from like the East Coast, Plymouth, the Pilgrims, Massachusetts, then we look all the way over to like California and say, how are people celebrating Thanksgiving in California? Well, it's been a tradition in California even less long because in California the statehood came later, and you would have all these different people groups. Like I don't know if like the Mexican settlers cared or celebrated Thanksgiving. They probably had their own holidays, and only as they gained more like Anglo connections, maybe then they started to also celebrate this holiday. But perhaps they had their own things going. So a lot of different groups in the United States. So that would be another factor. And then, yeah, so it's kind of like this religion as well as Abraham Lincoln, they have a kind of quasi-religious significance in the United States. So in the United States, people won't say that like Abraham Lincoln is like a sovereign king or something like that. Americans will often look at look at how the Soviets venerated Stalin, or the Chinese venerated Chairman Mao or something, and they'll kind of scoff at that. Or look at North Korea, where they have a picture of Kim Jong Il or whoever their current leader is. I think they have pictures for everybody in that dynasty. But while Americans might be kind of dismissive of that stuff, then you could see how figures like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington have kind of been, we could say, elevated to this interesting sort of American veneration in the United States. And looking at a holiday like Thanksgiving, well, like I said, I generally have positive feelings about Thanksgiving, but you could really see how from the start it's kind of a lowest common denominator. Like, let's just not be at each other's throats. Let us come together on at least this grounds sort of holiday that I think reflects the very shaky grounds and non-cultural unity of American society, which, ironically, whatever you want to call it, we have these phrases like a pluribus unum, and you could say, well, in what sense are we unum? And you might say, oh, well, we're one, in that we're all together under the Abraham Lincoln algocracy. I don't know. You tell me. Ripper says, probably important to point out few Americans would know Thanksgiving came from Lincoln. Yes. So I looked that up today. I didn't know it was like Lincoln and Mary Had a Little Lamb editorial lady that sort of pushed and promoted this holiday. I think I wouldn't be surprised if, like, on the East Coast in some capacity, it had been celebrated every year as like a harvest season festival. But as we know it today and stated, at a fixed date on the calendar and so on and so forth, yeah, it's a very relatively new holiday. I would say most people's basic knowledge is like, oh yeah, the pilgrims and the Indians ate together, and then on Thanksgiving we get together and we eat and we're thankful. Like that would be the extent of the history that most people would have about it, or the cultural significance. And then they might have their own family traditions about, like, oh yeah, we have a potluck, so people bring different dishes or something. I think you might have that. And then families might even come up with their own traditions, like, let's all go around the table and say three things we're thankful for or something. I've been to, like, groups, meetings, dinners, stuff like that, where people have done things like that. But just as a society-wide phenomenon, we could say that it's, as a cultural form, if we're looking at it, a pluribus unum, the pluribus is many, and the unum, the one, the thing that's common core, that's shared among different celebrations of this. It's quite minimal, I would say. Okay, so I think that'll do it for talking about Thanksgiving proper. The next thing I wanted to talk about was then this add-on holiday. So if we're saying Thanksgiving is a relatively, oh yeah, that sounds good, sort of holiday, then following right after Thanksgiving is this holiday called Black Friday. So lots of people are quick to point out the irony of, oh yeah, Thanksgiving, people are like, I'm thankful for this, this, and that. And then you go to Black Friday, and then people are like, yeah, but I want to buy stuff. Now, nothing wrong with buying stuff in of itself. This is not a anti-consuming stream. Though, in fact, I would encourage you, do go out and buy. The American economy needs your help at this time. But yes, Black Friday shopping. So what's that about? Let's learn about Black Friday. Black Friday is a colloquial term for the Friday following Thanksgiving in the United States. So I'll just say, while Thanksgiving is a federal holiday, I think if you work in certain places, you always get Thanksgiving off in the United States. Oftentimes, you will get they'll call it Thanksgiving weekend off. So you'll get like maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You'll have like a relatively long break from work off during this period for a lot of different companies, particularly white collar, at least, will be pretty sure to give that. The Chinese restaurant where Reaper ordered food from, they were probably still working, but then they might choose another day off. Like they might be off every Monday. A lot of Chinese restaurants like to just take some day off. All right, so let's learn more about Black Friday. It says there's some rumbling. I think they might be doing some construction thingy outside. I'm just gonna run over and close the window really quick. Hold up one minute. All right. Pardon for the noise. Maybe they're cleaning the roof or something. Okay. So Black Friday, routinely the busiest shopping day of the year in the United States since 2005. So sounds pretty recent. Let's look at the history of Black Friday. So I would say basically for my whole life, I'm millennial generation. I remember people talking about Black Friday. So let's see. The earliest known use of Black Friday to refer to the day after Thanksgiving occurred in the journal Factory Management and Maintenance. Woo, that sounds technological society. For November 1951 and again in 1952. So, following World War II, here it referred to the practice of workers calling in sick on the day after Thanksgiving in order to have a 4-day weekend. So maybe Thursday you drink a bunch of wine or something, so you just want to crash and have your Friday off to go chill and do stuff. Let's see. However, this use does not appear to have caught on. Around the same time, the terms Black Friday and Black Saturday came to be used by the police, Philadelphia and Rochester, to describe the crowds and traffic congestion accompanying the start of the Christmas shopping season. Okay, so I think too that's another thing I've heard just buzzing in the air. Haven't looked at the numbers that Christmas shopping officially starts after Thanksgiving. Let's see. In 1961, the city and merchants of Philadelphia attempted to improve conditions, and a public relations expert recommended rebranding the days, quote, Big Friday and, quote, Big Saturday, but these terms were quickly forgotten. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So it seems like eventually people just started referring to a phenomenon of shopping that happened. It started to be called Black Friday, and then people said that, so that's why it's an unofficial day. Then, so it looks like there's been Santa or Thanksgiving parades. So Macy's department stores probably start to launch campaigns around following Thanksgiving. So the commercial activity sort of initiated a new season at this period, such that you could use Black Friday as a sort of demarcation to show the start of an event or a kind of ad campaign. For many years, retailers pushed opening times on Black Friday earlier and earlier, eventually reaching midnight. So that's to say that if Black Friday really starts on Thursday, it's like they want to start the shopping season earlier and earlier in order to capture more potential customers. Cool. All right, so let's revisit our topics here. So Thanksgiving, American holidays in general, I would say that, yeah, a lot of American holidays, they're quite new and they're unstable in the sense that they haven't been established like a lot of American families in general, I would say. A lot of people moving all over the place, not really having roots. We've talked about this term, bugmen, which perhaps we could talk more about. But as a lot of more Americans have become bugmen, likewise, we could see reflected in how a lot of holidays and stuff are celebrated. It's kind of like a do-your-own thing and a very lowest common denominator sort of thing that unites diverse people around you. Reaper says, this history is strange. I thought black meant it was the first time of the year the retailers were in the black profitable. Yeah, Reaper, I've heard that too. So probably if I search this article, like if I search, let's search profit. Okay, here we go. So it's a theory. Black Friday, under this theory, is the beginning of the period when retailers would no longer be, quote, in the red, instead of taking in the year's profits. So maybe like with doing your business stuff, you just had to buy a bunch of supplies, your budget's going down, but then once you start making sales, then you become in the black. So it could be called Black Friday. It seems the precise origins of that aren't clearly established. Oh, and Reaper, yeah, he brings up another good thing. So then we could see how has Black Friday been extended. Yeah, then there's this other holiday, which, like unofficial holiday called Cyber Monday, which is the Monday which will be following this upcoming weekend. So here we go. Cyber Monday is a marketing term for e-commerce transactions on the Monday after Thanksgiving in the United States. It's created by retailers to encourage people to shop online. The term was coined by Ellen Davis of the National Retail Federation. So those clever retailers thinking about how to get more sales. And Scott Silverman, and made its debut on November 28th, 2005 in a shop.org press release entitled Cyber Monday, quickly becoming one of the biggest online shopping days of the year. You see, that's what you could do if you are in the National Retail Federation. You could have a press release and just announce a new big day to people. And provided you did your market research carefully, I think you would have a big chance of succeeding, provided the market conditions are favorable to you. Okay, here. So in 2005, the New York Times reported the name Cyber Monday grew out of the observation that millions of otherwise productive working Americans, fresh off a Thanksgiving weekend of window shopping, were returning to the high-speed internet connections at work Monday and buying what they liked. That sounds like, in general, you get like a bunch of nerd males. They're going to the store like, okay, yeah, that's a nice dress. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they get home. They go to work on Monday, entering stuff in their spreadsheets. It's like, oh, what would be nice when I get home if I could have a new computer, high speed, my internet. And then on Monday, let's suppose they have some leftover money that they budgeted for that shopping, then they're like, oh, I could buy myself a toy. Cyber Monday. Yeah, so Reaper, that was an interesting thing to bring up too. So we could see pretty recent again, 2005, there's new marketing. I'll just use the general word holiday, like a marketing holiday that's kind of created, but it's not like a federal holiday that you get off, nor is it a overtly like a religious holiday commemorating like a religious event. Rather, the National Retail Federation or someone just made it up. And I'll note that all over East Asia, they have this sort of thing too. So maybe they saw how this sort of model was successful in the United States, and then they brought the technique over to East Asia. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe they did these things first in East Asia. I'm actually not sure. All right, Reaper says, at least for a while, reports of how well businesses did in Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales, i.e. how much they sold, has become a de facto metric for measuring the health of the economy. Yeah, Reaper, I've heard this too, that for certain sorts of industries especially, like imagine if you're like the Michael's craft store. I don't know if you have those near you, but it would be where, if you want to like make wreaths and glue together some bells and felt and that sort of craft stuff, right? I could see how during like after Thanksgiving, maybe they would sell a whole bunch because people want to do some kind of do-it-yourself Christmas decorations or something like that. So I think that it makes sense just from a thinking about it, common sense type of perspective, how a lot of sorts of retail business, especially, they would do most of their sales in a particular shopping season as opposed to spread out throughout the year. And then looking at those numbers would be a good de facto metric for measuring the health of an economy. Like right now, I'll just say, in the news, there's a lot of people saying the prices are going really high. There's all these shortages and so on and so forth. So if this holiday season, you just get a lot of people refraining and not buying as much as they used to, or not buying anything at all. Admittedly, I'm kind of in that camp. I'm not doing very much to help stuff out right now. Just leeching off YouTube's bandwidth, doing this for free. I'm thankful for YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. That's to say, this might reflect that, yes, no matter what the numbers are at different times of the year, if during this critical period the economy really slows down, then what does that mean for you? Right, Reaper says, we have this dual thing where Macy's and other department stores kind of created modern Thanksgiving with parades in the first part of the 20th century, and we talk about how that is kind of corporate America tapping into a kind of pagan style of symbology and creating a pseudo-cultural reality. Yeah, I mean, I think you could look at how, just look at the idea of brand loyalty, and I think like the name of Nike, for example, isn't it named after like Yeah, Greek goddess who personifies victory. So if we look at like brand names and stuff, and how they might be associated with various historical pagan entities and stuff, I mean, these connections are pretty overt. So like in ancient Greek civilization, Nike, in English, Nike, victory, was a goddess who personified victory. Her Roman equivalent was Victoria. So we could look at a statuette. Got some wings. So, and then we have, of course, a very popular brand, Nike, that a lot of people follow, and they'll buy Nike over Adidas. Why? It's like, because I buy Nike. Like, I don't know why. Reaper says, but simultaneously, when people measure the health of an economy from Black Friday, we get the opposite, i.e. a shopping holiday becoming a prediction of the future and again a pseudo-religion. Well, going off this religion topic, like, so I'll go back to this Thanksgiving article that we're seeing here. So traditionally, like with different religions, you would have fasts and feasts at different periods. So even with the pagans, or not the pagans, the Puritans, the Pilgrims in the U.S., right? So here it says New England and Virginia colonists originally celebrate days of fasting as well as days of Thanksgiving. Thanking God for blessings such as harvest, ship landings, military victories, or the end of a drought. These were observed through attending church services and feasting. So you would commemorate different events and give thanks for particular things in a particularly orderly fashion. Going off what you're saying, Reaper, it seems that the modern American holidays, in many ways, they kind of mirror the structure. But what is the sort of cycle that is driving the feast and the celebrations? Because most people aren't farmers, so they're not doing harvests, they're not doing ship landings. Of course, a lot of people are in the military, but most people aren't celebrating military victories. And droughts, I would say, I'm in California, we've been told we're in a drought for a long time. But I would say for most Americans, this reality is kind of abstracted from you. Like, I'm not going to go and take like a super long shower or something and just use water like whatever. But, I've just been living my life using the water I need to live. I'm not like being extra careful about saving a lot because I don't think I use very much anyways. So that's just to say stuff like droughts, a lot of these different events that people might have celebrated before with these sort of feasts, for a lot of Americans, they're very abstracted from people. If you just turn on a faucet to get water and then drought means that your water bill goes up a little bit, like most people aren't farmers, so they wouldn't be using these massive quantities of water. Maybe if you own a car wash or something, it's different. But I'm just assuming you go home and you have a kitchen, that sort of thing. So if these things aren't there, these sort of more natural events, occurrences, then the question is what sort of events or what sort of things would be kind of markers in your life. And then also, too, like another religious activity that people will do is people would go on pilgrimages. So, for example, you might go on a pilgrimage to venerate some holy object. So you have a saint that you have a special relationship with, then you might go to their birthplace or where they died, to see their body, something like that. These are sorts of pilgrimages that people in the Western world as well as the Eastern world have done for a long time. So in America, though, we don't really do that. We kind of do that. So let's go back to Abraham Lincoln. This is interesting. So, like, people will go on like museum tours, right? You might say like if a grade school kid said, I'm going to go on a trip to Washington, D.C., then to most people, I would say to most adults, if they heard, oh yeah, this kid's going to Washington D.C., it's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. You're being like a good citizen, learning about civic participation, how the government works, that sort of thing. It's a kind of pilgrimage in a way. So in America, we will pretend that we aren't like venerating Abraham Lincoln and stuff, but then the actions that people do a lot of the time, basically, it would mirror a lot of the more traditional forms of veneration and things that people would do. Like even, for example, like my parents and a lot of other people I know, they like to visit like national parks and state parks. It's very common these days, especially for California people. They want to go outside, be healthy, do something. So one thing that people that go to a lot of national parks or state parks do is they might have like a little booklet, and when they go to the different parks, they'll like get a little stamp at different places. So there's the same pattern that people who are, for example, if you're going on a trip for a pilgrimage, like if you went to visit the Holy Land, you went to go to Jerusalem, then you would probably have a tour marked out, depending on what religious affiliation you are. You would probably have certain sites that you would want to visit, and you would go there and you would make sure to see all the sites. And in the same way, we could see nowadays how people might say, I want to go to all the Disneyland parks. Or you even get, people on YouTube and stuff, they might be like, I want to visit all the countries. Or in the United States, right? You might get somebody saying, I want to visit like all the presidential libraries, something like that. Reaper says, oh no, Alan is deconstructing my national park. I'll never be able to think of my hikes the same way again. Yeah, you'll like stroll up there to the visitor center and you'll be like, am I just trying to use this forest as my monastery? Am I? So I think that there's natural part of being a human is that there's all sorts of activities that we do, and even if you tried to get rid of them, erase them, run away from them, then just because of how we're made, you will kind of gravitate towards them. I'll just give a linguistics example from this. So for those of you who are viewing this who haven't viewed my stuff before, I have a background in linguistics. I went to graduate school for linguistics, eventually becoming a rogue dropout academic here on YouTube. But I have studied a bunch of different languages and linguistic stuff. So often I give language examples. So the language example I'm giving today, I'm suggesting like there's certain things that people do even if nobody externally apparently gave them the idea to do that. So one cool thing in linguistics is you could study the like Creole languages formation. That's one of them. And then the creation of signed languages. So it would be that you would have some deaf people, so there's nobody to teach them languages, but then spontaneously people would come to create systematic ways of communicating. So this might even just be between two siblings. Like imagine you have a family and then one of the kids is deaf and then they have a sibling that could hear. They might actually just develop a language spontaneously where maybe the kid that could hear interprets for their deaf sibling, and they have their own language that they spontaneously make. So it's like even if nobody explicitly taught these kids the language, that just because of what it means to be human, they will develop this system. As long as you don't like strap them to a chair and throw them in the closet, if they're just integrating and operating in this society to the best of their capacity, then they will manifest this ability. And then similarly, this idea of Creole languages or pidgins, I won't get into the whole politics or the distinctions between different things. People have bickered endlessly about this, but the idea here too is if you get like people that speak different languages and you throw them together at say a trading port, and then they have something to do, like they want to negotiate prices for goods, they want to trade some things, then people will find a way to communicate, and you have a port where people keep on coming in and out. Whether you want it to happen or not, just spontaneously, systematic communication will arise. So these languages that will come up in terms of grammar and stuff, it won't be like what they'll call a highly inflected language like Latin or Greek, where you'll have, all these different endings for nouns. So it would be different to say like a person, people, of a person. In Latin and Greek, these highly inflected languages, you have what you call grammatical case endings. These words will look very, very different. So we could go to my website, take a look at this. Anyways, that's to say that these things would be kind of more sophisticated aspects that you might find with languages that are written, but with these spoken languages, Creole or Pidgin languages that spontaneously will pop up, you would be less likely to see that. Yeah, so here it's like an example. If you want to say one tablet, it would be a tabela, but then you have multiple, it's a tabelai. And then if you want to say like part of a tablet, it would be pars tabelai. And then of great tablets, tabulatum, magnatum. Some Latin going here. So stuff like this, it would be a more complex inflection going on in the language. You wouldn't expect to see that in a Pidgin or a Creole. But over time, maybe people start writing it down and other things happen. Then such a language might develop these features, but you wouldn't see it immediately. Anyways, why was I bringing up this language stuff? The reason for bringing up the language stuff was talking about just patterns that humans do. So Reaper was talking about national parks, this sort of thing, and saying, yeah, it's kind of like people are almost reinventing religious pilgrimages, reinventing a religious calendar in a way. And then I gave an example to say like how language behaviors will emerge. Likewise, right, you could see how other aspects that traditional religion captures, that in the new American system, basically these things are just forming, crystallizing, coming out like a strange, dark copy of a pattern that is innate to people, in my view. All right, we have Hello here joining us. He says, hello, Thanksgiving. Alan, thank you for your video response. Oh yeah, so Hello sent me an article, and then I did a video responding to this article he sent. So if anybody's ever interested in getting my views, my comments on something, feel free to send it my way, and I will make a video for you. This is like one of my goals with this channel is we got a lot of people, we got the internet, but one complaint people often have about the internet is that it's kind of impersonal, it's passive. So why don't we do something better? What we could do is we could make the best use of things like YouTube, make the best use of the social features that are available to us, and through doing that we could we don't need new technology, we just need to use the existing technology better, and we could make these tools very, very valuable for us at a very, very low price, all things considered. All right, Hello says, Alan, would you reverse that language idea, the Whorf hypothesis? All right, let's look at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. We'll do it. So there's this idea called linguistic relativity, and I'll briefly give my opinions on it. Okay, so I'll just read the Wikipedia blurb here. The hypothesis of linguistic relativity, also known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or Whorf hypothesis or Whorfianism, is a principle suggesting that the structure of a language affects the speaker's worldview or cognition, and thus people's perceptions are relative to their spoken language. So this is the idea that the form of the language that you speak, it might influence how you think about the world. So if in your language you make certain distinctions, then you'll also think those certain distinctions. Now, I think if you think about what this means a little bit further, it quickly becomes quite boring. Okay, so let me try to explain this. First, I would say there's a kind of misconception I think people have a lot of the time, where they say, like, I speak English, you speak English, okay, we speak the same language. Now, that it's true in the sense that we have like a lot of overlap of words and concepts that we could understand, right? But language is a complex, organic thing. It's not a fixed system. Like if you have a programming language, there's a definition of the programming language. There's only a small set of things you could do. And then anything outside of it, it'll make your computer blow up. You can't do that. Now, spoken language doesn't work like that, right? Like I could use a new word that you didn't know before, and you could teach me new words on the fly too. Like, for example, today, if you didn't know what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is, then now we're talking about it. Now if you hear it again, you could remember what it is, and you could talk about it or recognize it if somebody else is talking about it. So human language is not like this fixed static thing, like you might say a programming language or something is, where in order to upgrade a programming language, that's why we have like software updates and stuff. But with human language, we don't have software updates. It's just through organically living our lives, we use language. So first point is the assumption that my English is the same as your English. That's wrong. It's not like I write a program in C, you write a program in C. We should both be able to run each other's programs because we're both writing the same C programming language. Natural language isn't like C programming language. Right. Okay, so with that being said, I think that it's more of the other way around, where people will learn different distinctions and then they could express those distinctions in language. So it is true that people that speak different languages, they might look at the world differently, but they looked at the world differently first. And of course, looking at the world differently, their experience is informed by speaking the languages, whatever languages they speak. But it's not like some kind of a priori cognitive thing where there's any blockers to doing it. So I'll just give you an example of how even within a language like English, you could see how Sapir-Whorf hypothesis doesn't really work. So if you learn any specific technical domain, you're going to learn a whole bunch of new words and specific senses for things. You're going to learn all sorts of concepts you didn't know before. That's just what it takes to learn something. Some new technical domain. So like you learn computer programming or something, then suddenly you could talk about computers and make jokes with computer nerds and do all sorts of computer stuff and talk about computers in ways that you couldn't have done before. And likewise, you'll also use a lot of words that you probably wouldn't before. So like a freshman in computer science, it's almost guaranteed that a freshman in computer science is going to make a bunch of lame jokes about recursion. It's almost given. Well, maybe if they're a smart ass type, but I know a lot of people who have made lame recursion jokes. If you search on the internet, there's far too many. In fact, let's look at one right now. I'm gonna go to google.com, search recursion. I search recursion. Did you mean recursion? Did you mean recursion? Okay, so, jokes like that. If you study a little bit of computer science, then you're probably face palming right now. Recursion pharmaceuticals. That's funny. If you study a little bit of computer science, you're probably like face palming at that joke. that I just displayed. But the whole point of that is, even within a language like English, you could see as you learn new concepts, then you're able to talk about them and you gain new, like, cognitive access, whatever you want to call it. And, like, if I taught you just a bit of, like, Japanese grammar right now, then you could suddenly understand just a little bit of Japanese. So, for example, if I wanted to say Alan's stream in Japanese, I would say, Alan no stream, right? Alan no stream des. Okay. So, Alan no stream des. This is Alan's stream. Now, if I said Alan no pen des. Okay, what did I just say? Oh, congratulations. You speak some Japanese. Now your mind is expanded. You could conceptualize the world differently. So on one level, this linguistic relativity hypothesis, it's like interesting at first. Like you hear it, you're like, whoa, ooh, it's like this. There's this movie recently that came out, and it's like, oh yeah, these aliens. Okay, spoiler alert, by the way. In this movie, there's these aliens. I won't spoil it too much. Just the general idea, and they speak this weird language, right? That they learn how to represent visually, and then the linguist person there, they get their mind blown because they could learn to speak this alien language. Their big brain is open to all these concepts that challenge what it means with human intelligence and all this stuff. Okay, so people have taken this idea and run and really hyped it up. And there's these other things, too, that nerds like called artificial languages or constructed languages, where people are like, oh, yeah, what if I had some concept, some idea about, oh, that's creepy. Look, they have a tower. See, all these people, they're like occultist weirdos when they make these things. They'll have some idea about, like,
if I just had this special language, maybe we could overcome all the human misunderstandings. So if I just engineer a new language.
Like, I think a lot of people naively get into stuff, believing things like that. But you just take a little bit of time to slow down and actually study the phenomenon a little bit. I think you'll be on Team Allen with regard to studying this phenomenon. All right, let's take a look at a couple comments here. Reaper says, talk about the innate human behaviors that spontaneously exhibit themselves and how that relates to the virtual good collection's desire for social interaction in the metaverse. All right, we might get to the metaverse soon. Let's see. Reaper says, what about the French? Don't they have a standards language organization? Yeah, okay, so we could talk more about this idea of standard language. I'll make a note about that because I think that's a very, very important issue. Hello says, when I first learned of it, I thought it answered everything, but I'm not so sure now. Great find. It's pretty funny. I learned of linguistic relativity through the Toki-Pona language. Yeah, so this Toki-Pona is an example of a constructed language, so we could look at that as a case study. And Hello says, why is the person engineering a new language a stereotypical man, Asian man? Okay, Toki-Pona is a perfect example of this. So one of the things that they try to do in Toki-Pona, and I've looked at this before, so I'm not speaking out of total ignorance here, is that they try to make a language with like a minimal number of words, a very simple grammar, so that you could like create all these new meanings with the minimal set of words. So whereas, you study a language like Greek, then you get like a fat dictionary like this, pretty thick dictionary. And this is just modern Greek. If you had an ancient Greek dictionary, it would be even more huge. So Toki-Pona, like,
those so many words, that's bloat. If you could do it in 200 words, and you could expand your mind by reducing things down to first principles.
So in a language like Toki-Pona, then you'll have these nerds, and they'll say, all right, we have like a small set of roots, and will reduce them all down to the symbol. So this would probably be a comprehensive list of all the roots here that they have, and then they could represent their whole language doing it like that. I think even they have made like a Chinese character mapping for their language where they only use like 200 Chinese characters or something. Anyways, it looks like they've made their own fonts so you could type their language with these funny looking little glyphs. So if you take the time to study this language, you could probably make sense of all these things. All right, comments. Hello says, I manage a couple of FOSS translation projects, and Tokipono translators are very demanding. By demanding, do you mean that they have very specific, they treat their language very seriously, or what do you mean by that? Reaper says to hello, interesting, and he wants to hear more about that story. All right. Okay, so this is actually fun. Interesting transition here. You brought up Tokipono because as one of the fun things that I brought up as clickbait Allen content in case we ran out of topics to discuss, which we didn't thanks to you all participating here, was this page, The Meaning of America, Sacred Etymology, because here we could visit some fun websites you typically wouldn't discover unless you're kind of digging in some slightly tinfoil waters. I would say this is pretty. Here we have, look at these tags: Afrocentric, American culture, American history, Apollo 11, esoteric, July 4th. So we got a very American page going on here. But so this looks at the etymology of the word America. Now, one thing that this page is doing is it's like looking for all these secret meanings. So sacred etymology, it's like going to go back to all these civilizations and look at what the sounds and the letters and stuff that go into America mean. So here, they have this alphabet mapping these like Egyptian characters with all the letters. It's starting to look kind of like these Tokipono stuff. And then, America would take the following meaning: a, the, Mary, beloved. An ancient Kemet, Mary by itself, or attached to other words denoted a sense of elevated status. For instance, Mary Kare means the beloved of the Ka of Re. The Ka of Re is loved, blah, blah, blah. Ramesses, Neftari, so on and so forth. And whoever wrote this actually made this full page just going through all this stuff. So, okay, I'll just say personally, I think this is like kind of amusing to look at, but I don't think this is like legit etymology research. I think this is basically nonsense, is what I'm saying. But let's take a look at just this idea of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and just show what could happen to your brain on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So if your brain is on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, then you might be like, yes, words have secret meanings. Okay, so if I learn like all the secret significances of the letters like this, then you could just go around and start looking at all these English words and start applying your analysis method to sort of unlock what you think is like secret knowledge about what all these things mean. But really, if your model sucks, you're just spouting a bunch of bullshit at the end of the day. I mean, it might be kind of fun, to know how to like write these things, but if the system you're learning and applying is not grounded in anything substantial, it's like there's nothing to it. Okay, so hello, he brings up another thing. So this constructed language called Lodgebond. Let's see. So they're Hello is talking about how people who would translate into these artificial languages like Tokipono or Lodgebond might have strict criteria or very particular things that they want people to do or that they do when they're doing it. But yes, I think it's appropriate time we could look at Lodgemon, another constructed language, and say some words about this. And let me actually just relate this to America, and let's actually bring in some let's America Max today. Let's look at the Deseret alphabet. Have you all heard of the Deseret alphabet? We're America Maxing today. So here, the Deseret alphabet, and then here's an example of what it would look like, is a phonemic English language spelling reform developed between 1847 and 1854 by the Board of Regents of the University of Deseret under the leadership of Brigham Young, the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church. So basically, the Mormons in the 19th century invented their own alphabet. So here you could see, and they have letters for the names and how they're pronounced. And here would be an example of how they would do it. So of course, a lot of the forms of these will they'll look like similar to the existing letters we had. So if you wanted to learn how to read this, it would probably not be too hard. So for example, here the example of how you would write rope. Then the O, it's got a little tick in the middle, so it looks like a Greek omega. And the R looks like a R. But then maybe with the vowels, they're more consistent. So for example, fate, you have the silent E at the end in English, but then their fate would be spelled like this. Their fade would be like this. Instead of having a TCH to make the ch sound, then etch, they have this C with the little comma thing here. So Reaper says that Deseret Lang is destined to fail. It looks complicated. Why would you reform letters and make them more complicated? Well, Reaper, aren't you the guy who talks about Russian influence and Russian collusion? So if you go and you look at the alphabets of, for instance, the various Slavic-speaking nations and ex-USSR nations, stuff like that, you could find a lot of nations that have used both. One thing I was looking at recently, I'll just pull it up really quick, is the Romanian language. And in the Romanian language, they have oscillated between their current variant uses the Latin alphabet, but back in the day, they used the Cyrillic. All right, we got to look at the Omniglot page. They have it laid out better. Yeah, so they used to have this style of letters, the old Romanian, and they used the Cyrillic alphabet, 16th century to the 1860. They had it modeled this way, so they have some these will be unfamiliar letters even to a person who speaks like Russian or something. And then eventually they changed to an English alphabet with funny squiggles, which you'll see presented here. A lot of different vowels. Oh, here it is. Right, so then this would be how they would show their language. So that's to say, when you switch scripts, like if you don't introduce new funny letters, one thing that might happen is that you have to have more combinations of letters. So sometimes you have to have a trade-off. You have to decide, would I rather have more letters or would I rather increase the complexity of my script by having more complex combinations of letters? And it seems like in the case of the Deseret language, or I'll say Deseret script, because it seems like they just wrote English using a new script. It would be like what a lot of these spelling reform people want to do. They're like, English spelling is way too complicated. So if we had an alphabet that just more clearly matched the sounds of English, then everything would be simpler. And then you have stuff like the Deseret alphabet being born out of people who would like a more logical in the sense it follows the sound matches the writing a little bit better. Right, Hello says just Google for Cyrillic calligraphy if you want to lose your mind. That's right. I already lost my mind studying Chinese, so I don't need to double lose my mind. Reaper says, didn't people respell English to add e's to the ends of words to make English look more like Latin? I'm not exactly sure. I should probably study a little bit more. My knowledge of the development of English spelling is actually not so good. Hello says, a lot of former Eastern Bloc states have had that tension. The most Turkic countries in Central Asia use both. Nationalists want Latin like Turkey, but most people know Cyrillic from Soviets. Yeah, if you go to like a country like Turkey, I think too they had written things in the Arabic script, and then the Arabic script might pose even some more technical challenges. So one reason I think a lot of languages or nations wanted to Latinize their language was believing that the United States and the West had better technology. So if they switched to a Western script, they would believe that would be allying themselves with the money. Basically, I think it's Kazakh language. Kazakhstan might have recently tried to push for this. Okay, so let's take a look at an article here. So May of 2021, pretty recent. And then here are the Kazakhs. They look kind of like Koreans, I think. Anyways, so here let's just read what they have to say here. Switching from Cyrillic to Latin script is widely seen as a positive socio-economic and political step, and one that will align Kazakhstan with the world community more closely. So here's a bunch of Kazakh adults learning the Latin script. Maybe they know the Cyrillic script already, but they're learning the Latin script. Oh no, those are children. Oh, they look a bit older. Okay. Anyways, they're attending a school. And do we have an example? Well, we could look at that later. Anyways, let's just read this blurb. So, declining Russian influence. And why do they want that? So they're making all the primary school children will start using the new Kazakh alphabet and Latin script in 2023. So imagine what kind of chaos that would be. Like, the parents know how to write in one way, and then the school's like, okay, from now on we're going to teach your kids to write in a new way. Pretty big deal, I would say, because then you might have the kids, imagine the parents have some books, then maybe the kids can't read any of the books that the parents had. Or the parents write some stuff down sometimes. Will the parents take the time to learn the Latin script? I mean, I would, because I'm, language nerd, but I don't expect most people to do that. And I don't blame them either. They got important things to do. That's why I'm sitting in my room on Thanksgiving talking to you all. So, you get what you bargained for. Hello says, in Turkey's case, it was the transition from the Ottoman Empire to a nationalist republic. It's an interesting example of top-down language and nation building. Hello adds, among other things, they removed most loanwords. Previously, it was mostly Persian. Stopped using Arabic script, which didn't fit the standardized language. Yeah, you bring up an interesting point here, Hello, which is that I think that with different scripts, there's different degrees of compatibility too. So, it would be very easy in English to borrow any Latin-based word because we could easily type these words. So it's very natural and it's easy to do. And I would even say Japanese words, Chinese words, there's a standard way in which you transcribe these things. But if we look at something I'm going to search Arab romanization, why don't we have very many Arab loanwords in English? I think one of the reasons we don't is because there's not really a very good standardized scheme to borrow Arabic words into English. So, as you could see, here's a chart with all these different ways in which people have tried to Latinize the Arabic language, and it's far from standardized. So unless you're like a specialist scholar in the topic, writing to other people who very likely already read Arabic, you're like, I don't know how to borrow an Arabic loanword. I would probably just pick a favorite system here and go with it, or use what people are already doing. But it's not so well standardized. On the other hand, because of Japanese weeaboos, the borrowing of Japanese words, the standardization of like representing and showing Japanese words in the Latin script is very well standardized, and yeah, it's practiced pretty regularly. And if somebody saw like a Japanese loanword, I would say most Americans, especially if you're university educated or something, you would readily recognize Japanese words. The Koreans are probably a little bit behind in the standardization, and I would say now the Chinese are actually very good in the standardization with the pinyin. As a point, I would just say every time people write Xi Jinping, you'll always write Xi Jinping the same way. And if you write Mao Zedong, you'll always write Mao Zedong the same way. Now, but like in the past, then there would be competing systems. So you might have seen this spelling for Mao Zedong earlier, Mao Zedong, like this, because these were different ways in which people represented the Chinese alphabet in the past. But now, because of the rise of the People's Republic of China, then there's a standardized way to always transcribe Chinese names. So it's pretty regular now. All right, looking at some comments. Okay, so hello regarding the Turkey stuff. He says it was also used for oppression. So this is the modification of the language, removing certain loanwords. The surname law of 1934 forced every Muslim to have surnames when they didn't before. You'd be Muhammad of Adam, etc. Muhammad bin Adam, something like that, trying to wing the Arabic, but they missed out 3 letters in Kurdish names. And this is all intentional and part of a nationalist program. Same for other minorities, all around making a truly Turkish Turkey. No Thanksgiving puns, please. All right, we'll refrain. Reaper says, the great vowel shift was a series of changes in the pronunciation of the English language that took place primarily between 1400 and 1700, beginning in southern England and today. Having influenced effectively all dialects of English, though this vowel shift, the pronunciation of all Middle English long vowels was changed. Some consonant sounds changed as well, particularly those that became silent. The term great vowel shift is sometimes used to include these consonant changes. Citation, Wikipedia, great vowel shift. All right, Reaper. So, interesting point just being brought up here is a lot of the times you could ask, how do we know about these linguistic historical facts? So there's this interplay of the writing system and then what you know about how people speak. So I would say it's a relatively modern phenomenon where we have a very precise way in order to describe pronunciation. So now, for example, if you study linguistics, I would definitely recommend you go and learn the International Phonetic Alphabet, which I believe was made originally by language teachers to teach people how to pronounce different languages. But so it's like an alphabet where it's all sound-based. So you learn particular symbols to pronounce particular sounds. Now, if I go to a page like this one on Lodgebon, and I'm wondering how do you pronounce Lodgebon, so I'll just zoom in here. Let's use some Allen technology. Let's go here. Okay, so here's how they. How do I clear? No, whatever. I won't clear style. So here's the word Lodgebon, and this is in the IPA alphabet. So this little tick on the top, that's to show the alphabet, and then this O sound. So it's actually not Lodgebon. They would want me to say Lodgebon, would be how they would want me to pronounce pronounce it. Anyways, you learn a tool like the International Phonetic Alphabet, and that would be how you could learn how to do stuff like that. Anyways, that's to say, in the modern era, we have tools like the International Phonetic Alphabet that could allow us to talk about language change in a much more precise and regular way. Whereas in the past, a lot of the times, how we would sort of guess at how things were pronounced and how you might have LARPers trying to reconstruct language would be something like you have some poetry. So you're assuming that these two lines rhyme. So you're assuming that like this combination of characters sounds like this one. So there's a lot of guesswork and reconstruction involved with a lot of these things. For this reason, like I myself, I'm personally not too interested in what they call like dialectology, this sort of stuff. I kind of just say, with written language, these sorts of things, there's certain things that you're just not going to know like exactly how it's pronounced, but the written language and stuff is interesting in of itself. You could just study that. But that is just my personal opinion. Let's see. So Hello mentions how, talking of Arabs, that it's only because of their holy book, their holy Quran, is the reason the language stayed together. Yeah, there's another spicy article here, Taleb on Arabic. So this guy, who's kind of famous for being an angry guy on Twitter, I will not pass judgment on him. I believe he's written a lot of things that I found very interesting and informative, so I'm not going to dab on him. But he speaks Lebanese Arabic, and I think I closed the wrong article. Taleb Arabic. And he has written an article about how basically the language, one of the languages that he speaks, Levantine, which linguists will call a dialect of Arabic, he's basically just dabbing and throwing massive shade on the academics and the feds who say this, and he's saying that they don't know what they're talking about and that it's a totally different thing. So let's just read a summary. Lebanese, more broadly, North Levantine, is influenced by Arabic as well as other languages such as Aramaic and Canaanite or Phoenician, plus its own local evolution. But it is not a version of Arabic, nor is it a version of Aramaic or Phoenician. It is at least 3/4 of a language away from classical Arabic, also known as Fusha. Much of the claims establishing descendants are unsound statistically. And then he just goes on his huge dab fest here, which you could try to interpret if you want. I'm not, but that's to say, yes, this whole idea of if these different people who are all speaking Arabic by the definitions of academics are indeed speaking variations on the same language, it is quite the spicy topic. On the other hand, I would say that like different Chinese speakers, for instance, they're often motivated to say like Mandarin and Cantonese, they might not be able to understand each other, but both would be motivated to say that, oh, we're speaking the same language because they want to claim the same heritage coming with the Chinese characters and the history of China, all sorts of stuff like that. So they're motivated to say how they're the same, whereas like Hindu versus Urdu speakers with different religion might want to focus on how they're different. All right, so then Reaper, let's see. Oh no, that was just his great vowel stuff. And then Hello says, I have to go now, but you know a lot about this, and I'm most interested in the political element. I know a bit about Turkish and Arabic in general, that regard, but would be interested in the political evolution of the Chinese language. The Communist Party undertook huge reforms and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we could, if people are interested in talking more language history stuff, I very much like chatting language history. And I guess I could conclude the stream a little bit by talking here about the standardized language thing. And we'll be able to tie this into Thanksgiving. Let's go full circle. Let us try to make this a complete, well-rounded stream. So one personal belief I have about a lot of language stuff is contrary to what a lot of I would say a lot of psychological type approaches to language are. There's this idealized linguistic idea with in the social sciences now that like all the languages are equal. You learn them through speaking, so whether it's Swahili or English or Chinese or Korean or whatever you're talking about, like they're somehow all the same. And I'll give you an example of how this idea is manifested. So if I go to Wikipedia, for example, and you look at the various different languages in Wikipedia, all of these languages are presented like in the same sort of thing. So you have Ukrainian, Chinese, Vietnamese. I do not know what this language is. Svenska, maybe that's Swedish. So you have all these languages, and they're all kind of presented on equal footing in Unicode on Wikipedia, whatever you want to call it. There's like on the web, there's HTML language codes, I think you would call them. So yeah, ISO language codes. So these are like all the languages that are officially languages by way of the internet. So there's a sense in which the internet, the technology, our technological society we're living in, gives equal footing, equal legitimacy to a whole bunch of different languages. And I'm putting languages in quote because you have to ask, what do you mean by language? And what I would say is that what people mean by language is basically a standardized variety of speech and writing. So how do you know that there's a thing called modern Greek? Well, there's a modern Greek dictionary. So some people came together and they decided maybe they're modeling after a particular writer. So for example, people would say a lot of modern Italian, it was kind of standardized around the time of Dante and standardized of Dante's Italian. So when did Italian really become a thing? Well, you would have somebody that would write in a particular way, and then a standardization would come up that would be based on a particular style. So then in this sense, it would be clear to see like how is Italian a language? Well, it's trace its roots back to the standardization around the time of Dante, and kind of people more or less followed that. Spanish, maybe they're Cervantes, they have their authors too. And likewise, English, English is a little bit more of a mess. Like it would be hard for us to read Shakespeare, for instance, but maybe we could say that like New York Times and journalistic newspapers and stuff were instrumental in standardizing English. So for the major languages of the world, you could see how they've kind of gravitated around standards. And let's see. Then in the 20th century, a lot of governments, so like here we had Hello mentioning the examples of like Turkish, a lot of governments from the top down, they would like literally write grammars and books and make educational materials standardizing their languages. And a lot of times this would be creating new things or getting rid of variation and telling people like this is now the new standard way to do it. So like in Japan, for instance, it used to be samurai, shoguns, all these people fighting each other. But now Japanese is like I think you would say the Tokyo variety is the standard variety of Japanese, and pretty much everyone's going to learn to speak the standard variety in school. And then if you go to other places like Osaka, they you might get people that know a bunch of regional phrases and stuff like that. But really, if you watch the news, watch YouTube, watch TV or whatever, then the Tokyo variety will be the standard variety, and then more and more so. And with China, there's like a Chinese variety, which is more close to Beijing, but not exactly like Beijing local flavor. There's kind of a middle ground standard thing. Chinese, you say 标准 is a standard for 普通话, the common language of China. So nations in the 20th century, especially, and the European languages a bit before, they actively had measures to standardize their languages. Now, in this day and age, we want to be inclusive, we want to be politically correct, all that sort of thing. So you'll get a lot of languages that are on here that you have probably never heard of, like especially languages from places like Africa, Pacific Islands, like a lot of countries that that are not popular they don't speak languages that are not that are popular world languages. Instead, probably they'll speak their local language, and then they will go and they will learn one of these bigger, more major spoken and written languages that's already standardized. So with the Unicode and the Wikipedia and all this stuff, what you see is that a lot of these super small languages, these Wikipedia pages, I wouldn't be surprised if over half the articles were written by just some academic who specialized in standardizing the particular language. I don't know how much the people that these languages are supposedly created for actually use and speak these languages, as opposed to just English or French or something. But if anybody does use and speak one of these languages, feel free to reach out and tell me about your experiences with that, because I'd be interested in hearing. All right, Hello says, wait, cult of Lincoln, wondering what I miss. Lincoln is 100% deserving of his cult. Sorry, Alan. A true role model of what a man, a president, should be. He says, I would like a Chinese for English Dummies video in the context of its political history and ongoing events around that. For example, simplified versus traditional, banning Hmong and Cantonese more. Okay, let's talk about Lincoln. So I'm not dabbing or dissing on Lincoln. What I was saying about a sort of cult of Lincoln was that one of the characterizing features of the United States is we have a lot of diversity. So we were looking at this phrase, a pluribus unum, a long phrase categorizing the United States out of many one. So this is a Latin phrase. And then the reason that we got into talking about languages and stuff like this was because I was making a claim that there's certain behaviors that are just innate to humans because of what humans are that will arise regardless of whether or not we want to. So I was talking about how language norms, people will just start to use language in particular ways, whether or not they intend to. It's just people will follow these patterns. So I was bringing up Abraham Lincoln as example of a figure where in the United States, we don't have King Arthur. We don't have national heroes in the same way that other countries have had kings and queens and maybe even like generals and stuff. Like we kind of do in the United States, but a lot of times it's like your hero is my enemy and so on and so forth. So Lincoln is kind of special, I would say, in that he kind of represents bringing America together. And just generally speaking, I would say Lincoln has good PR. Like, I'm not going to diss on Abraham Lincoln myself. And I think there's some facts that, we have to acknowledge about Abraham Lincoln that aren't necessarily bad, but like just to say, as a wartime president, Civil War and stuff breaking out, if you're just a total libertarian type, you're going to have to reckon with the fact that in order to keep the United States together, President Lincoln would have to use some very strong arm methods. People might even say to exercise tyranny in some ways. But in doing so, he was able to preserve the Union. So Lincoln, in many ways, represents this a pluribus unum, the out of many one, a kind of symbol or icon, or there's a cult around him, whatever you want to say, of the force of what brings America together. So is what brings America together. Like we shouldn't fight each other and slavery bad. I'm cool with let's not use violence and slavery is bad. That sounds pretty good to me. But what does having that sort of approach and not having a more natural form of organization mean that we're ruled by computer algorithms with the impersonal system, with the kind of creepy looking, almost looks like a server room tomb of the Lincoln Memorial? Are there a bunch of like servers and algorithms in here that are ruling the United States behind a statue of Abraham Lincoln? Do we have a liberal algocracy implemented as we know it? Like, I don't know. Maybe we do already. I don't know. It's not for me to decide. Okay, so we have a comment from Mimtel. Let us get a translation of Sinc Semper Tyrannis. Latin phrase meaning thus always two tyrants. Okay, that's probably in the dative case. Sic thus semper always tyrannis. And George sends his greetings. Cool. Well, we brought it all around back to Abraham Lincoln. So I want to thank all of you for joining the stream today. Seems people enjoyed hearing about the language topic, so I'll plan on having more to do about that. Talk about standardization, history of Chinese, maybe do a little bit of research into Turkish Arabic, ask Hello to tell me more about these things. But it's been a good stream, so I hope you all have the rest of the day, and I thank you all for joining.